So I talk a lot about speeches and monologues and auditions, but not enough about duologues. So let's get into it. So the obvious thing to mention is the fact that you are only ever going to be covering half of the dialogue because the other person who you are reading with will be handling the other half. So there's an element of unpredictability because you don't actually know what the other person is going to do, what choices they're going to make in the moment. So first and foremost, what you want to do is prepare to within an inch of your life. Preparation is key, regardless of whether that is a duologue or regardless of whether that is a speech. Preparation is the foundation that you put in place before you begin to build with impulsivity and instinct within the moment. So in regards to auditioning with scenes, you may or may not know in advance whether you are going to be reading with another actor in the room or whether you're going to be reading with the casting director or the casting assistant. And it's kind of good to know those things in advance if they do give you that information, because then you know whether you're actually going to be getting impulsivity and choices given to you in the moment by an actor, or whether you're just going to have a casting assistant reading in the lines and no more. The actor will probably be up in the space with you and actually treating it more like a rehearsal. But with a casting assistant, they will likely be sat alongside the audition panel or behind the camera if they're recording the audition, and they will just be feeding you the lines. And this becomes a little bit more difficult because they will not be giving you choices. They will not be giving you what an actor would be feeding you in a rehearsal room in that moment. So it's up to you to kind of creatively bring both those characters to life. And in order to do that effectively, you need to prepare it ahead of time, which means that you need to be mining the text for evidence to give you choices and impulses and options in the moment creatively. So even if you're only being fed the lines, you can at least bring to life and suspend your disbelief to think that they're actually giving you something to play off of. So with all of that said, these are the 4 things that I say that you should be doing to prepare and execute scenes within an audition. So the first is that if they ask you to get off book, get off book. But I will preface that with getting off book actively. I've worked with so many actors, both in drama school, auditioning for drama school, and professional actors that just learn their dialogue being static, being sat down, not actually doing anything actively, physically, whilst they're learning the lines and getting it all off book. But that is going to be really, really problematic because when you get into the audition room, you are going to be moving around. They are going to be asking you to do things. They will be redirecting you. If you're working with another actor, they might be giving you other options to play with. And when you've got that many plates spinning in the air, if you haven't learned the dialogue whilst being active and changing things up and being flexible, then the dialogue will be the first thing to fall away. And that is the worst thing that you want to have happen in an audition when they've explicitly asked you to get off book. So I say when you're learning the dialogue, do it as you're doing something else physically. I was working on a soap opera for 2 years and they would give you scripts really, really far in advance, but then they would change them as you went through. So as you were getting up closer and closer to actual shooting day, and even on the shooting day, they would be changing the dialogue, which meant that you actually needed to relearn scripts really, really quickly because you needed to film them. And the technique that I developed was I would bring a football along with me to the studio, and as I was learning the dialogue, I would be attempting to do keepy-uppies. I think I could only manage 2, but still, the practice of actually doing something physically along with actually doing something psychologically marries the 2 up, so that it didn't matter what was thrown at me when I was on set, the dialogue was always there for me. And because you're going into a situation with a scene with a partner who is unpredictable and you don't know what's going to be thrown at you, you need to be able to have that dialogue locked in. And the best way to do that, and the most surefire way to do that, is by learning the dialogue actively. Next, you want to pick the defining moments. So because you won't actually be able to rehearse with either the actor or with the casting assistant ahead of time, you need to actually scan your scene and pick out the 2 or 3 defining peaks within the scene that you want to actually honor and venture towards as those kind of pivotal defining moments within the scene. So if you think about like a WWE wrestling match, go with me on this, both wrestlers know who they're fighting, they know who's going to win, and they know that there will be 2 or 3 really kind of big pivotal showstopper moves within the actual fight, but everything else is improv, everything else is dancing. And that is the same for the scene. So you don't know the kind of nuance and the details of what's going to happen in between those moments, but you know that you're going to venture towards those really kind of big pivotal moments within the scene. It means that you have peaks and troughs within the scene, it means that there is energy build and decrease, and that there is colour and flavour filtering through it throughout. It stops it being monotone, it stops it plateauing. And that could be something as simple as your character gets given a new piece of information that they didn't know before, or your character changes their mind, or somebody knocks on the door. But you know that they are pivotal moments within the scene that are coming up that you are venturing towards. The next thing to do whilst you're preparing is don't get stuck. Try it loads of different ways. Much like I said with learning the lines, you're going to be faced with redirection. You might have an actor that is going to have a different take on the scene and will be giving you different choices. If, as you're preparing, you're getting stuck in just doing the scene in one way, then it will be really, really difficult for you to shift and change in the moment. So make sure that you don't just get stuck, that you try it loads and loads of different ways, that you remain flexible and adaptable, that you're entering into the scene with new impulses, that you're viewing the character and the situation and those pivotal moments in different ways each and every time. Keep asking yourself questions and mining that text, because the last thing that you want to be is a one-trick pony. The next thing, and probably the most important, is the fact that you want to listen and give your full attention to your scene partner. And that is regardless of whether they are an actor up in the space with you or a casting assistant sat on a chair just feeding you lines. The reason why they have given you a scene as opposed to a speech is that they want to see how you collaboratively operate with another human being in the space. And good acting is generous acting. Good acting is working to affect another human being as opposed to you just sitting there and emoting and being affected yourself. That is selfish acting and it's shit. So make sure that when you are in the room, you are fully engaging and actively listening and responding to what the person is giving you in the moment. There is nothing worse than an actor who has predetermined all of their choices and sticks to it regardless of what is given to them in the moment. It means that you're not listening, it means that you're not accepting offers, it means that you think that your choices are better than everybody else's. It's selfish acting, it's cut off, it's indulgent, and we can see it a mile away. Treat it like a rehearsal. Treat it like an explorative experience where you are collaborating with somebody else and you are seeing what happens in the moment. Yes, it's great to have an understanding and an idea of what you want to do with that in the moment, but you always need to be adaptable and flexible, which is why your preparation is so important. But impulsivity and instinct are the thing that drives the audition itself. And the last thing, and the thing that is kind of most complicated, and there are rules and exceptions to the rules, so it's one of those things that has nuance and you need to read the room when you're there. And that is whether you honor the moment or whether you fulfill the moment. And this is specific to stage directions. So you won't have as many stage directions with a speech as you will do with a scene. The stage directions gives you the action of what happens with the characters within the scene. So that could be something like so-and-so punches so-and-so in the face, or they both kiss, or he tickles her, or so-and-so pulls out a gun. And it is important for you to determine ahead of time what is appropriate to do in the moment and appropriate to do with the person that you're reading with. So let's take the first point. Is it appropriate to execute? So when you're in an audition, especially if it's a first round audition, the likelihood is you have never met the person that you are reading with, regardless of whether they are a professional actor or whether they are a casting assistant. So particular stage directions like, and then they kiss, probably won't be appropriate for you to execute in the moment. They are strangers. They probably don't want to be kissed by endless people auditioning for the same part throughout the day. It's probably not a good look for anybody. The same goes for so-and-so punches so-and-so. You are not, under any circumstances, permitted to actually inflict harm on anyone in an audition, nor in a rehearsal room, nor in a performance. That is why you get fight directors in and they will actually choreograph that with you. But the stage directions like, and then they bring out a gun. Now, of course, you're not going to be bringing out an actual gun, but the actual act of bringing something out or miming something, that might be an appropriate stage direction to actually fulfill in the moment. Now, when it comes to something like then they kiss, if you're getting to something like a third or a fourth round where they're actually doing chemistry tests and compatibility tests or screen tests, then they might want to see that in action. But because it's a particular level of intimacy, that is something that actually needs to be communicated in the moment. So you actually need to talk to the actor who you're auditioning alongside. You need to talk to the audition panel and gauge who is actually comfortable with doing what. And for the most part, when it comes to things like that, the audition panel will guide you through it. They will say, no, we're not doing that. Let's just kind of play around the idea, but we're not actually going to execute that. Or they might actually be, yeah, that's fine as long as you're comfortable with that. It's about making sure that nobody oversteps any boundaries and making sure that everybody is comfortable, because at the end of the day, this is your job. It's a case of using common sense to decipher what is and is not appropriate within the moment. So you need to be able to scan the stage directions and think, okay, is that something that I can fulfill in the moment that isn't going to cross any boundaries, that is actually going to be executable? Able to be executed in the moment. And then the second point, is it appropriate to execute with that particular person? Now, of course, if you actually have an actor up in the space auditioning alongside you, the likelihood is they will be willing and able to engage with you on a physical level to some extent. So if that is things like they shake hands, they hug, things like that that come to you in the moment, that is probably okay. It might be worth saying, is this all right to do, just before you go for the scene? And if you get an affirmative, then great, go for the whole thing. But if you're actually reading with the casting assistant or the casting director, they're not actors. They're not used to doing that kind of thing and will probably not appreciate it, which is why you don't necessarily fulfill the stage direction in the moment, you honor it. And what I mean by that is that you bring the energy of what that event would be, both before, during, and after the event, into the scene itself. So you actually honor it by marking it with energy, with time, with a beat, so that you're acknowledging that the event is happening, because the likelihood is it will probably be one of those pivotal events that you have prepared ahead of time, but you're not actually physically executing it because you're not reading with an actor. But again, you need to decipher what is and is not appropriate in the moment. Read the room, read the script ahead of time, and make those decisions. Actually, one of my more memorable recent auditions was I went in, I was auditioning with another actor, and the scene was his character was having a kind of psychotic breakdown, was trying to break all of the windows in the house with his bare hands, and I was trying to stop him. And the scene was mostly improvised with little smatterings of dialogue within it. And I'd never met this actor before, and he'd never met me before, and all it took for us was to just say, is this okay to do? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, let's go for it. I knew for a fact that I had to get physically engaged with it. I actually had to forcefully, physically manhandle him in order that he wasn't doing that, because that was part of what my character was doing within the scene. So all I did was make sure that I had permission to actually put hands on this actor in a forceful way, and then I made sure that there was no furniture, there was nothing that was going to hurt him or me, because I was responsible for the action within the moment. Once I determined that everything was safe and I had permission to do all of those things, we went for it. And we actually ended up wrestling on the floor for about 10 minutes with a stranger. God, my job is weird. Funnily enough, we both got the job, so that was fun. But my point is, it's about making sure that it is appropriate to fulfill in the moment, and it is appropriate to fulfill with the person that you're actually fulfilling it with. There we go. They are my top tips for how to prepare and how to execute a scene within an audition. Now, if there's anything that you found fairly vague or want a little bit more detail on, or if you've got some questions, just make sure that you put them in the comments below, and I would love to get back to you. And make sure that you pass this along to anybody that you think would benefit from this. Any actors that have got auditions coming up that they're using scenes for, then please send this on and get this out to as many people as we possibly can. But until next time, thank you so much.